Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about those CFP rankings, roughly what I expected, nothing overly crazy in those rankings. I will say it definitely drove home the idea that this is probably not the right format. The idea that a 5 seed would be set up in a very good position and the 1 seed would possibly be playing Georgia in the second round, not necessarily the way I want this to go about. So I assume that we're going to change that after the year and we'll see a very different playoff in the next couple of years. But as of right now, it'll be a very fun time, a couple of very fun matchups. I think that matchup between, I'm blanking here, between Notre Dame and SMU. That's the one that I was very excited about. We'll see if that one actually comes to fruition, but at the end of the day, will be interesting to see what happens there. The format will be changing. I can almost promise you that. But we got some games to get into, and we have a lot of games to get into over the next couple of segments, so let's go ahead and jump into this one. This is special, no doubt about that. 13 years in the making, an SEC title spot on the line. A&M trying to stay alive in the CFP race at Kyle Field at night. This one is going to be just about as good of an atmosphere as you have ever seen. Now, I kind of grew up, I was born in 2001. Apologies if that made anyone feel old. If it made me look old, I feel really, really bad. But at the end of the day, I was born in 2001. The last time this was played was in 2011. So I knew this game was being played. I definitely watched it. I enjoyed it. Didn't really appreciate what it was. This is going to be the first time in my life where I really get to sit down, watch the Lone Star Showdown, and really appreciate it for all that it is. And I cannot wait. It's a game that I've been looking forward to for the entire season. It is officially here and it has all of the stakes you could possibly want on the line for it. So A&M obviously coming off that tough loss to Auburn and quadruple overtime, they're going to need a much better pass defense in this one if they're going to want to beat these Texas wide receivers because they're a load to deal with, no doubt about that. Texas got the win over Kentucky, but the injury to Quinn Ewers definitely casts a little bit of a shadow around their season, around this game in particular. We'll see how mobile he is. He's not necessarily the most mobile guy to begin with. Him being a little bit hampered now, that D-line for Texas A&M definitely licking their chops just a little bit, seeing if they can get after him in. That's actually the matchup of the weekend. Texas O-line against Texas A&M D-line. I think across all the games across the weekend, probably the most fun matchup to watch. You got Nick Scourton, you got a lot of really Shamar Stewart, a lot of really talented guys on that A&M defensive line, and then one of the most experienced offensive lines in the country on the other side. A lot of really incredible guys, two probably first-round talents in Cam Williams and Kelvin Banks on both tackle positions. It's going to be a lot of fun, especially with the hobbled Ewers. That O-line for Texas is going to have to hold up against just a ferocious group up front for Texas A&M. And for A&M, you cannot get into a hole early. You went down 21-0 to Auburn early, and you had to claw your way back in, and you were able to do it because Auburn made a couple of mistakes, and because that Auburn defense is a little bit attackable. Texas defense is not nearly as attackable. You are not coming back from 21 down against this Texas defense because passing into this Texas back end is pretty much a nightmare. They are really, really good on that back end, and they will absolutely make you pay for just about everything that you try to do. So you're in a position where you got to score first. You got to get this crowd involved. You got to make sure that that 12th man is a real factor in this game. If you fall back, then this Texas offense is going to be able to kind of just run you to death. This Texas defense is going to be really hard to get over 24 points on. So if A&M is going to win this one, you're going to want to drag it down into the mud. There's no doubt about that. If Texas gets over 30 points in this game, A&M's only done that one time this year. So it gives you an idea of if Texas can get to that 30-31 mark, might just be a little bit too much for A&M. But this is a game that I just cannot wait for. This is a game that really everyone should be incredibly excited about. I think that atmosphere will be better than any atmosphere we've seen all year. I think these two fan bases are going to get after each other in a way that you have not seen in quite some time, and it's everything on the table. You know, A&M almost kind of fumbled that a little bit last week, but we still have a spot in the SEC title on the table. We still have just about everything you could possibly want, and you have a lot of hate to go along with it. Cannot wait for this one to get underway, and definitely the game that I was probably most excited for the entire season. Definitely for this week. Cannot wait for this game to get underway. But let's talk about players to watch, and I'll start with Ryan Wingo. I thought a very interesting thing about the A&M back end when they were playing Auburn last week is it's not necessarily, they did struggle with the speed of those Auburn receivers, and Texas has that in droves, obviously, but I think they struggled with the physicality as well. Keandre Lambert-Smith went up and got some passes. Cam Coleman was a ton to deal with. Ryan Wingo's that guy for Texas. He's a very physical 6'3", 205 type guy. He can go up and get one, and if these corners for A&M are going to be able to get, kind of mossed a little bit by Keandre Lambert-Smith, it's something that Ryan Wingo can absolutely do. So maybe that big body is a big factor for Texas in this game. And then you do have Anthony Hill, one of the best linebackers in the country. The fact that he's not a Butkus Award finalist is absolutely ridiculous. But at the end of the day, he's still playing in this game. He still wants to win a national title, as he said earlier this week, and he's going to have his hands full with Marcel Reed. That zone read is something that they absolutely love to do. Read option, whatever they can do to get Marcel Reed's legs involved, they will do it. Anthony Hill has kind of been the eraser of a lot of those quarterbacks for Texas throughout the season, whether it was Taylon Green or Martin Van Buren or a couple other guys that they have played throughout the year. They have not been very effective running the ball, and that guy's a huge reason. So he's going to be chasing that around number 10 a lot on Saturday, and he's been very effective at it throughout this season. Noah Thomas is a problem on the outside. He is a matchup nightmare for every single corner in the entire country because he's 6'6". He's an absolute monster. He can go up and get those 50-50 balls in. When I look at the A&M pass game, I think it is very, very solid. I think it's one that can absolutely get you to the SEC championship and give you a shot to win it. The only way you're going to do that is if you have the playmakers making plays on the outside. So Noah Thomas going up and getting the 50-50 ball. Jabri Barber making a play after he makes the catch. Jade Walker making that third down catch. All of these guys are so important. Noah Thomas is the one that's just a nightmare for just about every corner in the entire country. Even with Texas having two of the best corners in the country in Jade Barron and Manny Muhammad, this is going to be a load to deal with. And then Bryce Anderson. He is the safety. He is the leader of this A&M defense in a lot of ways. Him and Torian York kind of call the shots in a lot of ways for that defense, and he's going to have his hands full. It is going to be a lot of work for him on Saturday. He's great at blitzing the passer, so I would assume that he's going to be used in that capacity a little bit. Probably will guard Gunnar Helm a little bit, which is a huge piece to that Texas offense at tight end, so he's going to have his hands full. He's going to have a lot of things to deal with, and he's going to have a lot of really good players running around him that he's going to have to direct traffic for. But keys to the game are going to be huge in this one, and a lot of them are a little bit intangible. Some of them are very, very real, but the 12th man is going to be a factor in this game. This is a unique atmosphere for every single one of the Texas players that is on this team. They've never played in an atmosphere quite like this one. They probably will never play in one like this one ever again. It is going to be very, very special. And the composure of this team has been very good in big moments. You know, Alabama last year, a number of Michigan this year, although not the biggest team on the other side, definitely still a moment where you had to keep your composure. This is going to be a different level. And Quinn Ewers is going to have to lead the way that he has pretty much throughout the entire year and have to keep these guys on schedule, on task, and not kind of getting lost in the atmosphere of it all. Then you got to score first. Whoever scores first in this one definitely is in a really good position for A&M. If you go down 21-0, we talked about it earlier, you are not getting back into this game like you did against Auburn. I can almost promise you that. For Texas, you score first, this crowd could get quiet in a hurry, and that's what you need to do. If you can neutralize this crowd, neutralize the 12th man, you're in a very, very good position. So whoever gets points on the board first, that's where the crowd's going to go, and that's going to have a huge bearing on what this game is. And then the Texas O-line against the A&M D-line. This will probably decide the game, one way or the other. The Texas O-line has been really good in the last couple of weeks. They've been running the ball very effectively. This A&M D-line's absolutely mean, though, and they're going to try to get after Quinn Ewers, especially with him hurting. The Texas O-line's only given up 6 sacks this year. A&M's had 23 sacks this year, so it's kind of good on good. It's going to be incredible to watch that unfold and could very well decide the outcome of this game one way or the other. I think this one's going to be special. There's no doubt about that. This one I cannot wait for. One of the games that I've been looking forward to more than just about anyone else on the schedule. I think Texas gets it done. I think it's going to be gross. I think it's going to be ugly. I think it's going to be weird. But to me, it kind of strikes me as that sort of that Alabama game for Texas last year, where it's not all that pretty. It's a little bit all over the place, but Texas makes those 1 or 2 plays downfield that totally change this game. I think Texas gets the win. I think it's a very fun game. I think it's very back and forth, but I think Texas gets the win and heads to the SEC championship and tries to get that rematch with Georgia. And then we got this one, the Palmetto Bowl that's going on in Clemson, South Carolina this upcoming Saturday. Cannot wait for this one to get underway. And South Carolina has become one of the best stories in the sport, and Clemson still very much has life for the CFP. So it's going to be huge, this game, no doubt about it. The question is, what is the impact of this game? You know, does it put Clemson in the CFP? Does it put South Carolina in the CFP? Does it put Clemson into the ACC championship? a lot of different things that could happen from this game. Frankly, Clemson could lose this game and still win the ACC and get to the CFP. So we'll see what happens there. But at the end of the day, the big question for me is, can this Clemson D-line and really just front seven in general, can they hold up against Lenora Sellers? Because he's become one of the best quarterbacks in the country. In the back half of the season, he's been absolutely incredible. And the front seven for Clemson is downright special. There's no doubt about that. But you have a lot of guys that you're going to have to account for. Him, Rocket Sanders, a lot of the guys that they play around with in the run game. It's going to be a load. They're going to have their hands full, no doubt about that. And I think when you look at this South Carolina team, they do such a good job. Dowell Loggins, the offensive coordinator, does such a good job at keeping these defensive linemen and linebackers kind of just off kilter that they find a lot of openings downfield. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think the D-line for Clemson, if they can take over this game, it's going to be a very long day for South Carolina. And really, the same applies to the South Carolina D-line. They can totally take over games because they have in the past. And this Clemson O-line has been very good, only allowed 8 sacks this year, but Dylan Stewart and Kyle Kennard have combined for 18. They are absolutely ridiculous. They're an incredible duo, and this group overall for South Carolina can get after the passer as well as just about anyone in the country. So it's going to be fascinating to watch the trenches battle. And then on the outside, I think you have a number of playmakers on both sides of the ball that are going to give some trouble. Clemson has a lot of really young, aggressive players, Bryant Westcoat, TJ Moore, Antonio Williams, a little bit more of the elder statesman around there. It's going to be fascinating to watch them against guys like Nick Emanwari and guys like Kilgore and all of these really talented back-end players for South Carolina. And then on the flip side, you have Josh Simon, you have DeLavon Campbell, you have a lot of talented guys for South Carolina, and Avian Terrell is going to have to hold up really well against some of these very talented wide receivers because it is going to be a really tough game, no doubt about that. I think there's going to be a battle. I think both teams like to keep it on the ground a little bit, likely one of those games that probably just comes down to 1 or 2 plays, and it will be a huge feather in the cap for an at-large bid for the CFP. Maybe Clemson still has that auto bid in reach. They definitely do, but we'll see what happens there, and I definitely think whoever wins this one is probably... South Carolina might be a little bit different. If Clemson wins this one, they're definitely first in line to get to the CFP. I think South Carolina could, if they win this one, if they win it in convincing fashion, I think they very well could be that first team in for the CFP if someone were to stumble. But players to watch. DeLavon Campbell has become a huge player for this team. He was incredible against Missouri, has been incredible really in the back half of the season, and the biggest thing he does is he gets downfield. He makes a ton of explosive plays, and I think when you talk about a game that is going to be a little bit ground and pound, a little bit grind you down, I think those big plays are going to make a difference. So DeLavon Campbell is going to be one of those guys that just has to stretch the field for South Carolina to win this one. And then you do have TJ Sanders. When I talk about this Clemson team, there are so many things that they do well offensively. The best thing they do is establish the run game and then play action. If you can't establish the run, it's going to be a very long day. And TJ Sanders and really all the defensive tackles for South Carolina are going to have their hands full with this guy right here. Phil Maffa, I think, is a huge player for Clemson in this game. He's one of those guys that when you have someone like Cade Klubnik, that is a very good quarterback, but does like to be on schedule, does like to have those one read, get the ball out type of plays, you need a run game to do that. You need to be able to keep the linebackers at bay because they love to hit those seam shots to tight ends and things of that nature. Phil Maffa is going to be the guy that really sets all of that up. It's going to be a load to deal with, but definitely a guy that can absolutely change this game. And then Sammy Brown has become a huge player for Clemson over the last couple of weeks with Wade Woodaz kind of suffering with an injury. A very talented freshman out of Parkview High School, only about 20 minutes from me here in Atlanta, but a really talented player, one of those guys that when you look at Lenora Sellers, when you look at Rocket Sanders, they're really hard to get down. And those linebackers for Clemson are going to have their hands full, and he's going to have to pick up a huge amount of slack with Wade Woodaz probably sitting out this game. But keys to the game, the South Carolina pass rush, as it is for just about every single game this season, it is going to be a huge factor in this one. South Carolina has 39 sacks on the year. Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart had 18 together. It's a ridiculous unit in every sense of the word. They're going to get after you, and Cade Klubnik's one of those guys that if you keep him clean, he's fantastic. If you get after him a little bit, that can get to him quite a bit. So it's going to be interesting to watch that one. Definitely a battle that could outright decide this one. Corralling Lenora Sellers is going to be a chore for Clemson in this game. He's one of the more electric players in the country. The Clemson front seven has plenty of guys that can make those plays. But a lot of guys, or a lot of teams that South Carolina has played, has had guys that can make those plays, and they just haven't been able to. So we'll see if Lenora Sellers can keep that thing going. And then explosives. When we talk about this game, I said it's going to be ground and pound, a little bit more run game. that means those explosive plays are going to be huge. Those 1 or 2 big-time plays, if they can hit TJ Moore, Clemson, or if South Carolina can hit DeLayvon Campbell down the field or Nick Harbor, it's going to be a huge difference in this game. And the way I see it, South Carolina just a boulder rolling downhill. I don't necessarily think they're going to have Clemson's defense is going to have the counter that they're going to need for this game. I think the run game is going to get to Clemson just a little bit in this one, and I think South Carolina gets that final win of the season, and we'll see how that affects the CFP race. I have to assume they're probably still on the outside looking in, but maybe they'll give them a little bit of a bump over Alabama, over Ole Miss if they were to win this game, especially if they were able to win it in convincing fashion. But I do have Texas winning. I do have South Carolina winning. It'll be interesting to see how those games play out, and definitely a lot on the table in those 2 games. But let's take our second break here, and when we come back, we got to talk about a couple other huge games. We got Notre Dame, USC, Miami, Syracuse, Kansas State, Iowa State, a couple of games that can definitely make or break some CFP hope, so we'll break it down right after this.